Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today. This is Dave Romero. This is a webinar on why Tupperware is going global with the Spoke LMS, and we're excited to have you guys here. I wanted to get us kicked off and started. We're right at 3 o'clock, so hopefully we get a few more folks joining us, and thank you for everybody who's already joined us. We're actually going to have a little survey here at the end of our conversation, and I'm going to be talking with a friend and great partner, Matthew, and we'll do some introductions here in just a second. I wanted to also remind you that there is a little question box there off to the side you should see for the webinar, and we want those questions. I think the most fun that we're going to have here is answering your questions, because we could drone on and on about all the things that we've done over the years, but we really want to be here to solve some challenges and help you guys out. And we also want to send some follow-up materials. So after we get done here, we can send on those follow-up materials, any information, and share that with you. This is a open source kind of conversation, so we don't want you to think there's anything behind the closed doors. So quick introductions. I want to get started by saying thank you. My name is Dave Romero. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at Unboxed. We've been serving our clients here for almost a decade, and we strive to make the best employee training and sales tools, mostly for Fortune 500 companies, that we can. And we seek to educate and empower and find new ways to do that with our clients. Our background is that we found technology to be intimidating and somewhat disempowering. Sometimes you were the servant and the technology was the master. And we set out to change all of that years ago. We wanted to make it so that the training and tools that people got a chance to use were actually better and much easier to use, and quite frankly, provided a better and more effortless experience. So our company focuses on those sales, training, and tools and technology aspect. And we've had the fortune to be able to work with the Tupperware organization for a few years now. And on the line with me today is Matthew Adnams, and he is a great partner. And Matthew, do you want to give a quick introduction and say hi to the folks on the phone?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name's Matt, as I've been warmly introduced. I'm currently the Instructional Designer and Facilitator here at Tupperware, and I've had around 10 years experience in organizational development, working for a number of organizations globally. And really my focus has been working with the Unboxed Technology on the Spoke platform, and been the kind of lead on implementing the Spoke platform here at Tupperware. And it's been a real pleasure working with the Unboxed team, and so far we're having really good uptake on the use of the platform.
Fantastic. All right, well, we're going to give a little bit of a backstory here. If we can go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about that partnership. And you know, what's interesting, you know, for over 65 years, Tupperware has been that household name. I think I can remember my mother and probably her mother using, it feels like this at least, the Tupperware products. And when we first got a chance to meet Matt and his team, you know, we thought a lot of it in that way. And it turns out the more modern version of Tupperware is significant. Over 3 million Salesforce members, 80 countries, 6 continents, and a vision that's very impressive. And I'm not going to take Matt's thunder here. It's coming up in a few slides. Matt, anything you want to add there on the Tupperware piece before we talk a little bit about Spoke?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we're actually doing this year in the US and Canada market is celebrating 70 years of the party, which is a big deal. So we've had a full celebration with people coming from all over the world to take part in that. So it's a big deal for us. But really, I mean, for us, our vision has always been around not just the product itself, but actually how we can change people's lives by giving them the opportunity to create their own businesses. And that's exactly what we achieve with our 3 million Salesforce globally. So it's although our product stands up for the test of time, it's more about what we can do for our Salesforce moving forward, and giving them the skills, the opportunity, and the community in which to become their best selves.
Fantastic. For the Spoke team, we actually, in a very similar way, we look for ways to empower and educate and give people an opportunity to learn on their own pace and in a way that's exciting and fun for them. So the Spoke platform is an award-winning platform. We've been working on that now for about 5 years. We continue to enhance it. In fact, the enhancement we're talking about today comes about via feedback from Matt and his team. at Tupperware, and that's the internationalization enhancement. And we look for ways to incentivize people, provide ongoing and sustainment types of training, and give good data and reporting on how people are going through the platform. So our whole goal is to make things simple. We think what's simple gets done, and we hope to be able to talk to you a bit about how we've done that today with the Tupperware team. So with that in mind, we want to start off with some data. First of all, important to understand what companies are facing out there. This is some data from Forbes, and it indicates the more global view of how companies face language barriers, and executives and management in the companies that were surveyed, and we've highlighted the source here for you if you'd like to go check it out, that you'll find 65% of them say they do face those things. And it's not terribly surprising if you're part of a global organization today, but they're expressing those concerns, and it really does make you think about how should I tailor the approach that I take to each of these different audiences? How much should I translate? What's the right amount? What's appropriate? And then what are some of those big challenges? So Matthew, over to you real quick. Talk to us from a Tupperware standpoint. What are some of those challenges that the barriers of globalization and having a native language are really coming to you, and what do you face in that area?
Absolutely. I mean, the key challenge we have is a lot of our training is designed here in our global talent development team, that we want to cascade and have that consistency across the board. Where we get the challenge is not necessarily in our offices that we have globally, because we have a lot of people that are multilingual, but it's actually more when we look towards our plant and manufacturing facilities that we have around the world, where multilingual people are actually a lot fewer. And so we really need to find ways to actually provide the right training at the right level that's in their own mother tongue, as it were, rather than it's all being in English. And that's really one of our key challenges.
Yeah, that's exactly how we see it with our partners as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about it. You know, Matt and I were talking earlier, and we were talking a little bit about making sure that language is not only in their native tongue, but also sanitized and effectively situated and structured so that it enhances the experience and not detracts from it. On this next page, we actually captured a bit more data from that same report, and it's pretty fascinating. You know, you've got 67% saying that miscommunications contribute to inefficiencies. Pretty easy to understand whether those are just, you know, benign and small inefficiencies, frustrating inefficiencies, or more serious ones. And then 45% saying that employees can't collaborate effectively. We see this a lot in our world within software development, for sure. If you're in a skilled labor type of workforce, you see this quite a bit. 42% saying productivity is lower than it ought to be, or that it's not where it's optimized. And then 37% saying customer service suffers, and you'll see that especially with the call center folks that we work with, or you know, different types of areas where there's a lot of phone or face-to-face customer service. And so it's interesting because, you know, from a global set of data coming in, we see a lot of the same things. Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about what you guys experience at Tupperware?
Yeah, I think so. The key challenges we have, we went with the approach of trying to get markets to develop their own training that could be in their own native language. But then we get the inconsistency between different regions and different areas of the globe, because one area is training something a certain way, and then when we go to another country, we find that they're doing it differently, and it's not connected. And so our challenge is that we do want a consistent approach to our training and the consistent messages going through. But then we have that challenge where you get it lost in translation if we try and do it one way, or it goes awry if the market's trying to do it their own way and not adapting the policies and processes that we need them to. So it causes a lot of miscommunication. Yeah,
and then you get the challenge of you get the content maybe dialed in and tuned in right, but then the platforms or systems that they're using add to confusion because there's this lack of understanding of even how to use that, and that's different. We've seen across different localities in different countries.
Definitely.
So with that in mind, there's something on the next piece here that kind of speaks to more about that productivity, and there's a safety aspect to this too, and it depends on the industry you're in. So when you look at the data and you see that roughly 84% here, or 84% either agree or strongly agree that workers are more productive when the manager specifically communicates to them in their native language, it makes you start to think about how systems and processes are structured, SOPs, any sort of thing that is designed to create an environment for efficiency and for process and consistency, to Matthew's point, is set up in your company. And so we pulled some data from OSHA as well, and we can provide the link to this here afterwards as well, that it describes, the misinterpretation that can lead to lower productivity. So in other words, misinterpretation of information or not having content or systems in their own language leads to a number of things, including injury and loss of life. In fact, OSHA's estimate here in America is that as many as 25% of job-related accidents are attributed to a language barrier, and that number is becoming more and more pronounced as more folks are not speaking the English language as a first language. So wanted to kind of tee it over to you here too, Matt. As you think about productivity, especially from the manager or systems point of view, what do you guys see?
Again, it's very similar to what's on the slide. We've had a lot of issues with productivity and particularly with the language barrier making a huge issue. We do have a lot of mobility with our senior leaders, but then that can affect when they move to a different area, different culture, different approaches. And so it's really important that we try and look at making sure that our employees that are moving around actually have experience in the language in the country they're going to actually help smooth out some of that miscommunication that happens.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because you want to give enough power to the manager at the local level to make some decisions on their own, but still have the consistency and the discipline from a corporate perspective to be able to structure programs and systems in the way that you are intending it to work. Talk to me a bit about that. I know you guys are doing some of that as well from a permission standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to look at getting some of our material consistently across that can be translated. So we're purchasing training materials in which we're selecting them carefully that they are already pre-translated by the provider. So it's the same message going through, but it's been translated effectively and consistently. My concern with that still is that because I'm not a native speaker of some of the other languages, is it going to be an exact translation, or is there still the opportunity for something to be not quite 100%? So that's where I'm getting people in my global team to actually assess and evaluate the training that are multilingual, and then they can make sure that the message is still consistent. And the challenge with that is it is time consuming to get them to do that.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, and we'll head to the next slide. Just a reminder for folks, if you want to ask any questions, please throw those in there, and we'll start to answer those as we go through. On this next bit, we're going to talk a little bit about making the training effortless, and in particular, learning has to be very, very easy in order for it to be good. And so a lot of folks, including us here at Unboxed, we think a lot about making it engaging. Well, here's an interesting statistic from Gartner. This came out in 2016. Again, we'll share this with anybody who's interested. If you look on the far left over here, you'll see ease of application, ease of access, and ease of consumability, especially for a digital learner, are all significantly more important than anything that has, speed or employee-created content or enjoyable products over there. I think there was 5 at the bottom, learner value ranking of 5 out of the total. So what we've learned from this data, and Gartner is a partner of ours, and I will say that a great source of data, is that making something easy is far more important than actually even making it engaging. And so when we've talked to our partners over the years, they've talked to us a lot about how, especially from a native tongue standpoint, if I'm having to use a clunky system that isn't translated in my language, if I'm having to navigate pages that I can't figure things out, that can be very hard. And one of the things we did with Matthew and the Spoke team is we made it so that the permissions that are set by Matt at his team can be different than some of the autonomy that we give to the local level. Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about your vision there and what we're trying to achieve through the super users and the different power users and whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're trying to do, the challenge with any learning management system is if you give too many people access to everything from an administrative perspective, they become behemoths very quickly and an absolute nightmare to try and make sure everything stays up to date and valid. The advantage of actually using this platform that Unboxed offer is that we can actually scale the permissions strategically. So what we'll do is we'll still have a central team of myself and a couple of others that have super user status, so we can see everything and we can manage everything from a upper level all the way down to a local level. What we propose to do is to actually go out to our markets and allow them to actually tailor their areas specifically for them. That gives them permissions to do certain things, such as manage the communities and to manage some of the resources. But at the same time, there's still a degree of oversight from us to make sure that it doesn't expand too quickly and too large, and it's controlled.
Yeah, and that's such an important aspect of being able to give a little bit of control to the folks, managers, leadership team, allowing them to make it as tailored to them as they can, but then also still being able to have your vision come true. So we did get a question here. I want to go ahead and jump in. Like I said, I think it's fun to answer these questions and kind of think about them. And the question, Matt, came back from Peter. He says, how much of Tupperware's training content is video? And yeah, question to you.
Very good question. We are currently I would say it's about a 40 to 50% right now. We're trying to go down the route of a blended approach. So we'll use a mixture of different mediums. So some of the e-learning content that we have has video content built into them. But then it depends also on the topic that we're looking to articulate the message on. We are trying to also branch into more of the micro learning, where they can just have a 2 or 3 minute video which shows them how to do something very simple. And on top of that, we then have other videos that can introduce the topic, but then give them much more meated material for them to actually get into the weeds with and really understand. I hope that helps answer the question.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Any other questions come through? Please, let's see them. We want to answer them. Why don't we go to the next slide here? This is a bit about Tupperware, and I wanted to share this because I think it ties in very nicely to where they're heading, but really more importantly, how they view the global audience. So, Matthew, you want to talk to this a bit?
Absolutely. So, guys, what you see on screen is really the vision and purpose of the organization. And as I alluded to earlier, although we are very world renowned for the quality and workmanship of the products that we sell, our focus primarily is actually on our sales force. And predominantly, women make up the majority of our sales force. And one of the things that we've been able to demonstrate over the last 70 years is our ability to actually cultivate confidence in our workforce. And gives them the empowerment to actually achieve their very best selves. What we wanted to do internally was actually replicate and support that for our associates. And we have around 13,000 associates globally that are employees of Tupperware. And so the first step that we took was to conduct an engagement survey to see where we stood currently as a bit of a benchmark across all areas of the business, but we had elements that focused specifically on training and development. And to help support some of the existing programs that we did, there was definitely a desire and need for people to take on some self-learning and have the opportunity to branch into that more. So by harnessing the Unboxed technology, we actually were able to create a learning management platform, which enables those in our organization to go in, do self-learning. And one of the extras that we actually asked Unboxed to provide us was for associates to actually go in and select training on their own, as well as for us to be able to assign training to them that would be mandatory. So it gives the learner the ability to do the stuff that we need them to do, but also gives them the opportunity to take responsibility for their own personal development. We're also harnessing the social learning because social media is everywhere now, and we wanted to take advantage of people being able to learn from each other within the organization, where they can post things that are in a safe environment rather than trying to branch out possibly with the likes of Facebook, etc., where there's a risk that confidential information could get leaked. So by having this internal environment, we could share all that information with each other. And one of the other challenges that we have, as I mentioned as well, is that we need the platform to be in multiple languages, because we want to give this option not just to the office workers, but also to our plant workers who also need development, particularly around things around health and safety, onboarding, etc. So we wanted something that could be utilized across offices and plant, but also on multiple devices, because a lot of our plant workers don't have access to a work computer. So we wanted it to be able to work on a tablet or on a smartphone device, because that's more likely to reach that wider environment.
That's
and really
great.
the result, all of that is just to enable us to deliver that consistent level of learning globally.
Yeah, I have to say that from a purpose and vision standpoint, it really spoke to us. And if you go to the next page here, you'll see that from a vision standpoint, what that resulted in is this as just a screenshot of the environment. And so, Matthew, if I could have you translate that at the top for us, that'll help. I'm just kidding. Sorry, that joke. This, I believe, is in Japanese, and it represents one of the 9 languages that we have in the platform today. And what you'll notice about the platform are a couple key things that to use Matthew's point earlier, that they're taking advantage of. One is this, news and information there at the front. There's this confident campus overview, and you might be wondering, why is part of this in Japanese and part of it in English? And back to his point earlier, as a local administrator, if I were in Japan, or if I were in a country that spoke Japanese, I would be able to put the language or put the content in my own words. And so we can create everything in your own words. And what you're seeing here is somebody who's created it in English and put it into a Japanese translated container, if you will. So in this case, if Matt wanted to, he could designate somebody in Japan as an administrator and say, go for it. And they could take all of their content and translate it into their native tongue. And what we found over the years is that as we work with global partners, there's a sanitation of the translation that's important. And do you want to speak to that a bit, Matt? I think we kind of alluded to it, but the sanitation of content, especially as it relates to different dialects, are really an important thing that you've been facing.
Definitely. I mean, I'm going to speak from my own experience of being a Brit working in the US. If you don't sanitize the language down to simple terms, you can say something that seems natural for you to say in your own native language, but can be completely misinterpreted or misunderstood by someone else. So it's very important that the phraseology and the terms that are used are very simple English, just to make it easier for the translation. But what I would also recommend in this situation is make sure that you have a couple of people from the same language, if you are going to translate your learning material, to review it individually and then to come together and just make sure that they're all translating it in the exact same way. Because sometimes certain statements that say are in English may need to be completely rephrased or reworded for French or for German or for Japanese, as we see on screen. So it just always be very cognizant of the terminology that's being used throughout.
Yeah, we see the same thing all the time. I'm sure many of you on the phone do as well. This is the Spoke environment. You'll notice it's Confidence Campus, which is totally branded for Tupperware. You won't see the Spoke logo in this instance here. And you'll notice a few things. You'll notice that there's a profile of the person and information about them, and they've earned some points or coins here. You'll notice that there's a leaderboard there on the left and some gamification built into it, and the news section there in the middle. And across the top, if I could actually read those words in Japanese, it would say things like training and community and resources. And all of that information would be there. And what's brilliant is that you can create this if you're a US or English-based native language company. You can do all of this in your native tongue and then hand it over to your admins that are on the ground there locally, and let them translate this English into the version that is most appropriate and tailored to their local environment. And what that allows for is consistency. To Matt's point earlier, that they're not creating their own flavor of everything, but it allows for personalization and improvement of that experience. And there was a question in here, I think, that came back again about the videos. And Matt, here's the question. It's how do you go about translating all those videos? What process or method are you using? And is there a decision that you make whether or not you do the translation?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your budget. There's different ways you can translate a video. Obviously, you can get people to be dubbed over the top of it. If you have absolutely no budget, or you have a huge budget rather, then you just reshoot the video multiple times in different languages. But most common, I find, is to use subtitles for other languages. it's not always the most interactive method, but it's sometimes the cheaper option than trying to get another voiceover specialist to actually do the translation effectively and in line with the video actions, as it were.
Yeah.
So
we actually.
and
Oh,
I was
please
going
do.
to say, sorry. Also think about what could get lost in translation if you are dubbing or subtitling, and it's making sure that the message and the learning outcome from that video has to be maintained throughout.
Yeah, you just took the words out of my mouth. I was thinking, that challenge of making, again, sure that it's sanitized and that you've got the right timing and everything to it is important. We actually have a blog article we wrote a few months back that speaks to all the different ways this can be done. We work with a number of global partners like Tupperware, and this challenge comes up all the time, so we can certainly make that available to you after this is over. And there's a real honest answer here that there are only so many ways you can do it, and I would say, just like Matt was saying, there's only so many ways that it actually is great. Other ones are just passable and good enough. So that's actually a good segue into the next page here, which is really about those considerations, and it really comes down to asking a couple of key questions. What business needs should this learning address? Is the language a potential barrier to the interpretation, understanding, and the material? And how can we make that learning experience personalized to the employee? And my personal view on this is it really depends on the learner's language proficiency. As long as it doesn't create an understanding barrier or cause significant interpretation issues or misinterpretation of the key concepts, it really shouldn't impact the learning too much. Now, if they don't understand what a key concept means, if it totally doesn't translate, they don't know how to apply it, that's when you've got an issue. And I think there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to this. And Matt, tell me your take on that. How do you guys approach that at Tupperware, making those decisions between, what should and should not be necessarily translated?
I totally agree with what you've said. The key thing is, first of all, be very clear on what your learning outcomes should be. I always try and press on everyone that this is the end that you should always focus on. What do you want the learner to walk away with, and what do you want them doing? What's the behaviors and the skills and knowledge you want them demonstrating? And then work backwards. And yes, sometimes a video or online learning is a great way to solve a problem. But if you then start to branch into where it could be quite a technical piece and the translation could be a real issue, you may need to reconsider different approaches, such as even just doing a train the trainer for local people that can actually then deliver the training in the local dialect. And then at least you know that the message can be clearly communicated and also questions can be asked. So it's making sure that what is the message you want to present and what do you want them doing, and know your market and audience. How crucial is it that they must follow the protocol that you want them to do in the program? If it's a compliance item, then you need to really, really factor that in. If it's soft skills, it may be less important. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, that's exactly how we see it too. That's fantastic. So it isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. There's definitely a strategy that needs to be employed here. Another quick question here, Matt, that just came in is a question around leadership buy-in. So when you go about trying to talk about what should and shouldn't be translated, how do you involve your leadership team, and in what level do you include them with those decisions, or how do they help you make those decisions about what should and shouldn't be translated?
That's a great question. I love these questions. You have to be a good salesperson. That's rule number one. With any C-suite conversations you have or executive buy-ins you need to be a good salesperson. And really, you need to explain what the benefits to the organization, to the department, and to that individual will be by doing that translation. Again, it's also debating what is going to be the best method to deliver that training and that message. So that's my take. Be a good salesperson, but also look at what are the tangibles that they can take away. How are you going to demonstrate that this is a worthwhile investment? Sometimes that can be a challenge with any training, because training doesn't always show physical return on investment in the form of dollars or whatever currency they're using. But you've got to identify, and my recommendation is pilot it. Always pilot a piece of training first before trying to roll it out to everyone. because that way you can identify any issues, challenges, and get them ironed out in preparation for a bigger rollout. And sometimes by offering to do a pilot with a C-suite, that often allows you the permission to do it and helps ease some of their concerns initially.
Yeah, that's great. Another question here on the platform side of things. Question is, how much more effort should we expect to include multiple languages in our training? I think I can field this a bit, and then Matt, I want you to jump in. In terms of effort and getting started, it really genuinely starts with getting your native language off the ground and going. And in our case, we work with a lot of U.S.-based companies, a couple of international-based companies, but for the most part, it almost always starts in English. And if that's your case, start in your native tongue in English. And to layer on a multilingual approach or putting in multiple languages, it really does come down to how you want to approach it. If you're using a company out there for translation services, there's plenty of them. We tend to use TransPerfect and many others like that. You can certainly partner with them and have them do a baseline translation. Our recommendation is to not just use a Google Translate type of service, but to go out and actually make sure that you have somebody looking at each piece, to Matt's earlier point, and sanitizing it, and that it's as accurate as it can be. That can take a couple weeks, usually, maximum, to go through, depending on how much you're translating. And then if you're doing video-based work, it could be a little more complex. To Peter's point earlier, you can either put subtitles in there, you can time those in there. Many of the authoring tools allow for that now. And so each piece has to be looked at individually. If you're running an average program with us, I would expect that you'd probably spend as much as 25 to 30% more effort creating an international program. And that's been my experience on this side. Matt, how about you? Is there a good estimate or rough number there that you'd throw out that it would take to include an international approach to something?
Currently, I can't quite put an exact figure on it because and this is a positive for Unboxed, I'm a one-man band when it comes to implementing this into the US market. What I'm currently working on now is an international group of project personnel, as it were, from different countries. And what I want to do is continue to work with them to identify how they want to roll it out in their areas and to identify what learning specifically do they need to get it up and running. We've already started that process, so we sent out, or I sent out information requesting what are the key training requirements and training needs in the areas that aren't being met at the moment. And from that, we can then identify what is the crucial ones that we need to get going straight away. And then we can start to formulate a medium and long-term plan of what other areas we need to look at and address. But at the same time, it's a learning process. We're gaining feedback from our audience all the time to see what extra things do they need, what are we using that we shouldn't be using, what are we missing. And what I would recommend is get champions for each of your country areas so they can take the leadership of their section, as it were, but which will help take the workload off of you and get a proper project team going.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think we're right on the same page there. It is. There's no doubt. There's nothing easy in all of that. For us, especially on the software side, every time we add a new feature or new functionality, we have to think of the multilingual approach to that. In fact, right now, I think we're right around 9 languages in there. We're expanding that through the end of the year, and then we're expanding even more next year. So we typically approach it based on need and what our partners are looking for. And so a lot of this comes down to when you add a new feature or functionality or whatever. An example was that leaderboard I just mentioned. That may work great in America, but it may not come off the same way in a different type of country or something like that. So it's an interesting and challenging dynamic from a product management standpoint. And as much as we think about the content, it really does come down to making the platform easy to use and understand as well. I think that for the most. Oh, please do.
One thing I'd want to add to that is I've worked with the multiple learning management systems in previous organizations. And one thing I will say from an administrator perspective, this platform is very, very simple to navigate, very simple to upload and update materials. So from a time perspective that it takes to implement and do these changes, it's from my personal experience, it's far less time consuming than other platforms that are out there.
Well, and thanks for that glowing support, Matt. I appreciate that. It's been a pleasure working with our partners like Matt to help build out the program and the platform and add features. There's one other question that came through here, and that question is really centered around how you involve local stakeholders and folks involved at the ground level. Many of the programs that we've seen, and I think I'm interpreting this the right way when I say many of the programs that we've seen often include a corporate vision, but how do you make sure that it's tailored at the local level? So Matt, do you have partners, for example, at each of the different countries, in each of the different countries or different areas or territories that you partner with on a regular basis, especially as you're thinking about enhancing new features inside of the Spoke platform or adding new content to it?
Yeah, absolutely. A classic example I'll give you right now is I'm working with our health and safety teams for our manufacturing plants. Because that's one area that they feel that there needs to be a significant overhaul of what they currently do, which is primarily face-to-face. And they want to give more time for people to do self-learning, which allows them to study at their own pace. And it also allows us to do more recordable events. And that's the great thing with the system is it will actually register when someone's completed, how many times it's taken them to complete, etc. And we can set reminders for when that training is required again. So one of the key factors with that is to talk to them about how would they implement it in a plant environment versus an office environment. What are the challenges they face? And that way we can start to discuss, and it's for me, it's like doing a diagnostic or training needs analysis, is to identify what are the challenges, what are the strengths, what are the issues we need to be aware of. And that way we can project manage it much better. And so you need a bit of project management kind of know-how thrown in just to make sure that it's a smooth integration.
You know, one of the things I value most is our project management, so I could not agree more. I don't think I'd even be here on this call with you right now if it wasn't for our team project managing it. So with that said, thank you guys for joining us. We really appreciated the questions. If there are any more questions, please submit those through and we'll make sure to answer them for you. This is, like I said, a two-way street. Good dialogue is always a teaching opportunity, but also a learning opportunity for us. We also want to share any of the information that we've sent out or shared with you today, and we can certainly follow up via email. If you go to that survey and put in your information there, we'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'll also share anything that we've talked about today with you. And at any moment in time, pick up the phone or hit us up via any of these channels up here. I think both Matt and myself, we would love to chat. We're kind of learning nerds, and we love this stuff. So if there's anything that we can do to help support you in your internationalization or globalization efforts, we'd love to do that. So thank you for the time today. And unless there's any other questions, I don't see any there. Matt, any final thoughts?
Not from me. I just want to say thank you very much for this opportunity. And to the audience, I hope this has been extremely helpful for you.